Welcome to Vesak Day 2020 at the United Nations. My name is Gaia Gamhevage. I am actually an international civil servant working in the World Health Organization. But today I'm here as an independent individual Sri Lankan citizen and a member of the International Buddhist Foundation in Geneva's community. IBF in Geneva is the main host, together with the permanent mission of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva. My job here is to keep order, keep things moving along, and to welcome and thank all the guests that come. We have quite a tight schedule, but we have some amazing, distinguished speakers who have been generous enough to take time out of their day to join us on this very special day. The welcome address is going to be very kindly offered by Her Excellency Tatiana Valovaya, who is the Director General of the UN organization in Geneva. It's an honor to meet you, and ma'am, I'm going to hand over the opening to you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a real pleasure to be with you, though in virtual format. We planned, of course, it's differently, but I am really happy that I am honored to join you in celebrating the Day of Vesak. That day is sacred for millions of Buddhists around the world, but it is also widely observed by non-Buddhists who draw strength and inspiration from the philosophy of Lord Buddha. This year, Vesak commemoration is especially momentous, as it marks the 20th anniversary since Vesak Day was recognized by the General Assembly in order to acknowledge the important contribution of Buddhism to the spirituality of humanity. And I wish to extend my special thanks to the permanent mission of Sri Lanka and personally to Chargée d'Affaires Diana Mendes for making this virtual commemoration possible. To say that the world is in transition is a gross understatement. What we are living today is not a just routine changement of our environment. Rather, we are facing a watershed moment, which only occurs maybe every other century. A new social and economic paradigm is emerging, and we all need to join forces to ensure that these changes have positive impact on all of us. The dramatic and fast evolving human, social, and economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic only strengthens further this point. At the start of 2020, none of us could have imagined that a disease outbreak could turn the world upside down in such a short time and in such a dramatic way. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost all over the world, nationwide lockdowns, economic activity at a standstill in a majority of countries, borders closed, and unprecedented measures introduced. The human toll of the pandemic continues to grow by the day, devastating entire families, communities, and its impact on societies and economies is also yet to be fully assessed. The ongoing pandemic has also greatly affected religious communities across the world. Since mass gatherings is now prohibited for safety reasons, worship services of various faiths have been halted alongside with century-old pilgrimages. Last April was marked by several sacred days for believers all around the world: Christian Easter, Jewish Pesach, and the start of the holy month of Ramadan. The pandemic has prevented pilgrims across the globe to travel to holy sites. However, celebrations of these holidays, albeit in the form of virtual events, such as the one which is taking place today to mark Vesak Day, nevertheless took place and reinforced our solidarity and compassion worldwide. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we all know the essential role religion can play in maintaining social unity and providing much needed emotional and spiritual comfort in time of crisis. Global emergencies prove that fate of all people are linked. A problem in one country can quickly turn into a worldwide threat, and the COVID-19 outbreak is the clear illustration of this. The pandemic also proves that without a coordinated and effective multilateral system, governments will ultimately fail to tackle any global challenge, be it COVID-19 outbreak or climate change. More than ever before, we need solidarity and political will to overcome this crisis together. This current crisis shows us that there is no alternative to multilateralism. However, the myriad of national governments, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and humanitarian actors can only be impactful if they act in a coordinated manner. In this fast-changing environment, new diplomatic policies and practices based on principles of solidarity and inclusiveness are urgently needed, bringing together all relevant actors from civil society, think tanks, academia, to regional development banks. The collective response to the pandemic has an uneven record. However, there is ample reason to be optimistic and hopeful. The pandemic has proven that we are able to make transformative changes almost overnight. It has forced a more rapid digitization of our workplaces and methods of work. Not only are we able to share health data and knowledge in real time, we have also managed to adapt swiftly to a virtual workplace. And it's a key achievement for business continuity in times of crisis. The crisis has also demonstrated that global solidarity does already exist. Across the world, we are hearing stories that demonstrate immense solidarity. Despite some complicated bilateral relations or continuing sharp disagreements in multilateral fora, many countries rush to help each other. They share medical equipment. They transport and treat intensive care patients when the hospitals or their neighbors are overcrowded. Besides intergovernmental cooperation, we are witnessing solidarity at the local level and between individuals, families, and communities. Restaurants and food companies have been cooking free meals for healthcare workers. Fashion houses have been sewing masks and personal protection equipment for medical personnel. Such examples abound around the world. In this time of upheaval, sorrow, and distress, religious leaders and faith-based organizations continue to play a unique role in bringing people together around the common values of our shared humanity, solidarity and compassion. Solidarity and compassion should be promoted both within and between communities of faith. According to the Buddha, to realize enlightenment, a person must develop two qualities, wisdom and compassion. He also taught that nothing exists in isolation and that all phenomena are interdependent. Just as profoundly, the Buddha taught that we cannot be happy as long others suffer. On the contrary, when we do reach out, we discover the best in ourselves. The spirit to care not just for ourselves, but for others, based on awareness of our interlinked faiths, lies at the heart of Buddhism. As we celebrate the International Day of Vesak, it is worth recalling that mindfulness is one of the foundations of the Buddhist philosophy. The wise approach of living in the here and now teaches us that the conscious awareness of the present moment is the only way to truly learn from past experiences and better prepare ourselves for future challenges. Here and now, let us renew our commitment to building a world based on solidarity to ensure peace and dignity for all. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Director General. Thank you for that warm and heartfelt welcome. Please feel free to stay for as long as you like. I do know your day is very busy. So I am now going to take a little while to explain what we're going to do. If we were at the UN today, the setup would be different. You would see people up on the stage, you would see the dignitaries. So I thought, we have 222 people online. I would like to acknowledge and welcome some of the people who have joined, if that's okay with you. First of all, I would like particularly to acknowledge there are distinguished ambassadors or permanent representatives to the United Nations in Geneva from Armenia, Estonia, Fiji, India, Israel, Laos, PDR, Libya, Mongolia, Myanmar, Oman, Palestine, Sierra Leone, Vanuatu, Venezuela, Vietnam, and the Charge d'Affaires of Bhutan. As well, we are honored by the presence of the deputy permanent representatives of Iran, Mexico, Nepal, Poland, United Arab Emirates, and other members of diplomatic missions from Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Croatia, Cyprus, Germany, Iran, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Montenegro, Nepal, Pakistan, Poland, Serbia, Switzerland, Ukraine are participating in this event that we know of. And if there's anybody else here, we welcome you warmly. And we thank the permanent mission of Sri Lanka for coordinating and making sure that you had the information to join us. So welcome, excellencies, ambassadors, deputy permanent representatives. Next, I would like to introduce a little the great speakers who you're going to meet today. The keynote address, we are very honored, will be delivered in a little while by Ajahn Amaro, who is the abbot of Amaravati Monastery in UK, England, and I will have the pleasure of introducing him more in detail as we go on. I'd also like to introduce to you the people behind the organization, absolutely, acting permanent representative of Sri Lanka mission in Geneva, Diane Mendis and her team. And actually the International Buddhist Foundation in Geneva, the president, Venerable Halyale Vimalaratna Thera. We will hear from him towards the end of the program. This was actually a deep wish he had, a spiritual wish, that we would come together with the international community to celebrate this. And several permanent representatives and ambassadors linked to Sri Lanka and Thailand have really helped us. In addition, I acknowledge Lalanta Sirisenege, who is an office bearer in IBF Geneva, and many, many others. I'm going to save the panelists for now because I'm going to introduce them later on. And I'm going to save the next two important speakers because I'm going to introduce them too. So Ambassador Sek, I'm going to introduce you in a minute. Same Secretary MFR Sri Lanka. Before we get to that, I would like to clarify why we're here. Why is it that we're celebrating a Buddhist celebration at the UN? So this is really an interesting question, and I myself as a Buddhist asked about this. So I want to give you a little bit of background. So Vesak actually means the month of May in ancient Pali language, and it is on the full moon day of Vesak that we celebrate this, and our speakers will speak to that, so I'm not going to go into Vesak. But this particular day became an international day in 1950 with the World Congress of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, where countries, Buddhist countries, tried to celebrate this day. But it was actually 20 years ago that it became a UN day, and we have a great speaker who's going to explain that it was in fact Sri Lanka initiated this in the UN. But why does the UN celebrate days? Is it important? Is it a waste of time? Well, the UN celebrates days for three reasons. Either to educate the public on issues that are important to us. The second reason is to mobilize political will and resources for a certain issue. And the third, I think very relevant to us, is to celebrate and reinforce achievements of humanity. And Buddhist Vesak Day, the celebrations of the teachings of the Buddha, is seen as something that is not just relevant to Buddhists, but to the spirituality of all humanity. In fact, in the UN General Assembly meeting, the 54th session on 8th February 2008, Resolution 54115 says, acknowledgement of the contribution of Buddhism, one of the world's oldest religions, has made over 2.5 millennia and continues to make to the spirituality of humanity. And more recently, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has said the timeless message and unity and service to others is more important today than ever. So we are seeing, even after nearly 2,600 years, the relevance of these teachings, not just to Buddhists, not as a religious idea, but to the development of all humanity. So this is just a little background on why we are celebrating this day. I'm just double checking to see we're not late. We are going to have the speakers as mentioned in the agenda. And then right after the panel discussion, there will be opportunities, particularly if any of your excellencies, if you wish to say something. So I'm going to get on with the agenda now. And it is the next speaker. It is absolutely a personal pleasure of mine to introduce Ravinatha Aryasinghe. He is the Secretary of Ministry of Foreign Relations in Sri Lanka. Many of you will know him as the former permanent representative of Sri Lanka in Geneva. I think many people know him. I personally am very grateful that he took time, particularly because of his involvement in Geneva, to share some ideas with us. And he's going to explain to you much more eloquently than I can about the significance of Vesak Day. Ravinath, Mr. Secretary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gaya. First of all, I want to congratulate the Foundation and the Sri Lanka Mission in Geneva, and also our Thai mission and all other Buddhist missions and Buddhist community, and all those who respect religious diversity, for putting this together and coming together. Special appreciation to Director General Titiana and to Ambassador Sek, my old friend, and to all of you who are joining us in celebrating Vesak today. Venerable Sangha, respected religious dignitaries, distinguished permanent representatives and excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to join you from Sri Lanka today as we celebrate Vesak, the day that marks the birth, attainment of enlightenment and the passing away of Lord Buddha. The day considered most sacred by millions of Buddhists around the world. The topic given to me has been the significance of Vesak Day. And driving through a city today to get here, which is very calm with a curfew, thanks to COVID-19, people pretty much at home. I think that COVID-19 has forced us to celebrate. I mean, this is in comparison to the usual Vesak Day, where by this time in Colombo, 10 to 7, after all, going to the temple and doing everything, we would be actually heading out to see the pandals and the various decorations, which is part and parcel of the Vesak tradition, not only in our country, but in all Buddhist countries. So today is different. But I think at the same time, there's a silver lining that COVID-19 has forced us to learn a couple of things. One, the impermanence of life in a very real way, and also how what we take for granted in life is not so, that it gets restricted here by a little virus, so that we can't take anything for granted. Then it also makes us, compels us, if you like, to search within, deep within, for meaning of things, to try to get over the moment we are in, and also to try to think ahead. It also forces us to shun extravagance. And I think a lot of the grandeur of celebrating Vesak might not be there this year, but as the Buddha would have said, it is more important that we be spiritual than doing what you call the Amisa Puja. Rather, that we must emphasize and pay attention to Pratipatti Puja, which the COVID-19 can't stop us from doing. And finally, days like today, in a very practical way, make us think and understand the importance of reaching out to those most in need. So, the significance of Vesak Day is significant today for more reasons than being simply Vesak Day, but because, to my mind, it also teaches us a little bit more about what being a Buddhist is and living a life which is Buddhistic. As we mark today, which is the 20th anniversary of the international recognition of Vesak by the United Nations, pursuant to the adoption of UN General Assembly Resolution 54/115, which was initiated by Sri Lanka following a recommendation made at the International Buddhist Conference convened in Colombo in November 1998. As we join with the United Nations office in Geneva to celebrate Vesak 20 years on, I take this opportunity to pay special tribute to late Honorable Lakshman Kadiragama, the then Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, who pioneered this initiative and proposed in his address to the UN General Assembly on 23rd September 1999 that Vesak be recognized as a special day at the United Nations. We also wish to recall with gratitude the solidarity and support that Sri Lanka received from Buddhists as well as non-Buddhist nations in taking this proposal through, leading to the first commemoration of Vesak at the UN in the year 2000. In fact, it is heartening to see colleagues representing many of those friendly countries joining us at this virtual event today, and I thank them for their support 20 years ago, and I thank them for their support today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over 2,500 years ago, Prince Siddhartha, the heir to the Sakya kingdom in present-day Nepal, set out on a spiritual journey in search of a solution to the sufferings of mankind. The knowledge that he developed and subsequently shared with fellow humans upon attaining enlightenment after 6 years of rigorous search comprised what is called Buddha Dharma today, a rich body of teachings upholding profound human values and focusing on the spiritual development of the human mind. The teachings of the Buddha signified a marked departure from the beliefs that existed in his contemporary times. It asserted man's power to be the master of his destiny and his potential to attain highest levels of spiritual development without help from an extraneous superior force. It expounded equality for all human beings, thus challenging a system with entrenched discrimination based on gender, caste, and other perceived differences. It provided equal opportunities to men and women, Brahmins and outcasts, and the rich and the poor alike, to pursue the path of enlightenment. In a world where the strength of individuals as well as nations was believed to lie in physical prowess and warfare, and their successors in material achievements, the Buddha's teachings upheld the values of peace, compassion, renouncement, and equanimity. As a teacher, the Buddha afforded his followers freedom of thought and expression in their full and true sense, encouraging them to question his teaching and to follow things that they convinced were wholesome. He advocated universal love, metta, to all living beings and preached tolerance and understanding towards other faiths and beliefs. As a teacher, in effect, the teachings of the Buddha have offered to mankind many millennia ago what one would call the bedrock of modern progressive libertarian values such as peace, freedom, and dignity for all humans, which we the peoples aspire and have pledged to work towards under the Charter of the United Nations and instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The significance of Vesak, therefore, lies squarely on the universal and timeless nature of the Buddha's teachings and its ever-increasing relevance to present-day societies that strive to champion universal human values in the midst of war, distress, widening inequalities, and COVID-19. As H.G. Wells wrote in his book, The Three Greatest Men, the Buddha, quote, gave a message to mankind that was universal in character and many of our best modern ideas in closest harmony with. It is in this unique humanitarian outlook of the Buddha and his teachings that has ensured Buddhism's peaceful expansion without any persecution or bloodshed across many regions of the world. It is its emphasis on peace and tolerance that has helped different faiths and beliefs flourish and harmoniously coexist side by side in societies built on Buddhist values and in times of conflict to minimize those tendencies to the maximum. It is the universalist nature of the Dhamma that has established Buddhism as a philosophy and a way of life among many non-Buddhists around the world, transcending the bounds of religion, organized religion. And it is timeless values that takes us to the teachings of the Buddha for spirituality and guidance time and again, and celebrate the life of the great human being he was in the form of Vesak, Visakha, or Buddha Purnima every year. As a country with one of the oldest Theravada Buddhist traditions in the world, Sri Lanka is proud to have contributed throughout its history to the noble cause of sharing the teachings of the Buddha with the rest of the world. Notably, it is in Sri Lanka that the teachings of the Buddha, which has been passed through generations by way of memorialization, were first transcribed on Ola leaf as far back as the 1st century BC, thus preserving and facilitating the dissemination of this knowledge to the world. Declared a national heritage last year, the government of Sri Lanka has also submitted a proposal to the UNESCO to inscribe this codified title, Tripitaka, as a memory of the world. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, as we mark the day of Vesak this year in an atmosphere of anguish and apprehension, let us draw inspiration from the life of the Buddha and his timeless teachings to build spiritual resilience, practice boundless compassion, and support fellow human beings and nations affected by the current global crisis in their hour of need. On behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, let me wish all of you good health and a mindful and peaceful Vesak. Sabbe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitatta. May all beings be well. May all live happy. May all beings be free from suffering. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Ravinath, both in your official and personal capacities for investing in this event. Thank you. Next, we have the pleasure of moving to Thailand, because in the preparation of this event, it was actually Sri Lanka and Thailand who were discussing doing this event together. So I know Ambassador Sek has been involved from many months, but because of COVID, we're doing it this way, and I'm really honored to invite His Excellency Sek Methi, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Thailand to the United Nations in Geneva. Ambassador Sek, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gaia. And of course, Venerable Abbot and monks, Director General Tatiana of UNOG, and my dear friend, Secretary Ravina, Excellencies, colleagues, Buddhist community. First of all, let me say that it is my honor to speak on the topic Buddhists in the era of new normal after COVID-19 at this very auspicious event to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the international recognition of the Day of Vesak. I very much appreciate the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka for hosting this virtual meeting and for inviting the Permanent Mission of Thailand to co-host and participate in today's activity. Indeed, the UNGA resolution recognizes the contribution of Buddhism to promoting human spirituality, which is a bedrock for peace, harmony, and compassion. Indeed, the international observance of the Vesak Day this year takes place in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are facing unprecedented challenges, regardless of who we are or where we are and what we believe in. Necessary lockdowns around the globe, the overwhelming of the healthcare system and the healthcare workers, the global economic recession and unemployment are of unimaginable magnitude. During this difficult time, many of Buddha's teachings and wisdom become more relevant and inspirational than ever, and will hopefully help us to reflect and prepare ourselves to cope and move forward through uncharted waters into an era of a new normal post-COVID world. Excellencies, back in the year 2000, when I entered the monkhood for the Buddhist Lent of 4 months in Bangkok, I benefited from the various Buddhist teachings and studies. I therefore wish to share with you 4 of Buddha's teachings that I believe would help us to adapt our lifestyle to this new normal, namely Khanti or tolerance, Sati, mindfulness, Ikibat, basis of success, and Kalyanamit, noble friendship. First, Khanti, or in Pali language can be translated as patience and tolerance. This is one of the key virtues of Buddhism. Ajahn Sumedho, who was an abbot of Amaravati Buddhist monastery and predecessor of Ajahn Amaro, our keynote speaker today, described Khanti as the peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. Hence, the practice of Khanti or tolerance can be beneficial for us, especially during the lockdown and the forthcoming new normal, where our ways of life will be restricted both socially and economically. We can apply Khanti or tolerance to guide us in coping with COVID-19 related measures and focus on how to implement these measures effectively for our livelihood and the society as a whole. The second teaching is Sati, or in Pali means mindfulness or awareness, which is an important requirement when we live in this time of pandemic. Without effective vaccination, we must try our best to prevent ourselves from contracting the virus. We need to be mindful and aware of what we are doing at all times and closely follow the relevant health recommendations. We must not put further strain into the already overstretched healthcare facilities and system. Thirdly, Itibat 4, which my friend Secretary Ravina had mentioned. In Pali, it means the basis of success. Itibat includes 4 virtues, which are firstly, chanta, or passion in your work. Secondly, virya, or putting extra efforts into what you are doing. Thirdly, citta, or careful focus on your work. And vimangsa, or thorough analysis of your current business and ways to achieve your goals. All professions are currently facing unprecedented challenges. In order to thrive in the new normal, it is more important than ever to reignite our responsibilities, efforts, and attention and dedication towards our duties, while appropriately adapting and balancing job or business practices to fit the new environment. Last but not least, Kalyanamit in Pali, which is a Buddhist concept describing the key qualities of noble friends, such as righteousness, honesty, constructiveness. Indeed, under the current situation, it is more significant than ever to foster solidarity to fight this pandemic at the community, national, regional, and global levels. And in this regard, the United Nations, especially the World Health Organization, which has been at the forefront in this endeavor, needs to be supported. And as the UN celebrates its 75th anniversary and chart its future path towards a new normal, we need to reflect and crystallize our thoughts on how to forge international solidarity and compassion for enhancing the prosperity of mankind. And I hope that these 4 Buddhist virtues, which have been among many of the Lord Buddha's teachings, will inspire and help us in protecting ourselves from the threat of COVID-19 and take us to a prosperous and harmonious era of the new normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sek, for that very practical reminder of the new normal. I know many people are mourning the loss of their lives, the way things were. But in Buddhism, we really do appreciate that nothing is permanent and everything is subject to change. As I work for the World Health Organization, we will have to learn to live with this virus, but live with it compassionately, as you said, and using these values. Patience, particularly, I agree, Kanti. My mother's name is Kanti, so I always remember this very well. She's a very patient woman with everybody except with me, but that's how I incorporate it in our lives. And I love the quote that you said, Kanti, or patience, is about living in peace or living peacefully with the unpleasant, because the unpleasant is inevitably going to be present in our lives as well. Thank you so much. That was very, very useful. We are going to go to a very important speaker now. And I say this not only as the moderator, but from a personal point of view. So I want to share my story with you. I am a Buddhist. I did not grow up in Sri Lanka. I grew up in the UK. And I didn't have access to the teachings of Buddha those days because there wasn't enough. There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't internet so widely, and we didn't have enough in English. But as I came back as an adult to Buddhism, as I became curious, Ajahn Amaro's speeches, his talks on Buddhism, where he simplified very complex issues into simple, everyday messages that touched your heart. So he was one of the inspirations for me to find my path back to Buddhism. So as a student, I'm very grateful that he accepted our invitation to be the keynote speaker. Now, because he's the keynote speaker, I can introduce him in a little bit more detail to you. Ajahn Amaro, I'm not going to disclose ages, we're about the same age. I want to give you a fun fact. You know, there are 580 odd Buddhists or people who say they're Buddhists in the world. But the mean age of Buddhists is older than the mean age of most religions. So the median age of a Buddhist is 37 years old. And the only religion that has older people than Buddhism is Judaism. And Christians and others tend to be younger if you take the world mean age. So this is just a fun fact for you. All right, so Ajahn Amaro obviously was, this is his ordained name. He was born in the UK to Jewish and Catholic parents, and he was brought up in a Church of England, a Christian environment. After he graduated from university, getting degrees in physiology and psychology, he decided to leave for Asia. He visited Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand on a sort of open-ended search for spirituality. This is how it is expressed. And it didn't take him long. He left in 1977. And in Thailand, Ambassador Sek, of course, you know the history very well. In 1979, he was ordained as a Theravada monk. Now, if you are looking at the videos of nearly 250 people today, you will see there are a few who are in the saffron robes. So those are the Buddhist monks. The rest of us who are Buddhists, on this special day, we are in white. So that is the color of the lay people. So he was ordained in the forest tradition, which is in the tradition of Ajahn Chah and many great teachers. And he was invited to come back to England and establish Buddhist institutions, which he did in the south of England. And then in the 90s, he moved over for some time to California and established a very famous monastery there, Abegiri, as well. And in 2010, he was invited to come back to expand his work in England. And he is currently the abbot of the Amaravati Monastery in the UK. I found his history fascinating. There's a particular book, it's called Tudon, The Long Road North. And this chronicles and it documents his experience, because when he was in the south of England, he was asked to create another establishment in the north of England, in Northumberland. And he did this. He took the Thai tradition of going there, 1,098 kilometers on foot. And there is a really interesting book about it. He's written many, many books, Silent Rain, Small Boat, The Great Mountain, Finding Inner Peace, but not peace, but peace, P-E-A-C-E. And you can look him up. There's a lot of information about him. And on the Amaravati website, you can hear his talks. He also, Ambassador Sek, he holds 2 honorific titles from the Thai government in 2015 and 2019, and really honoring his service to society in the teaching of Buddhism and others. We call him Ajahn Chan because Ajahn means teacher. You can call him Ajahn Bhikkhu, we call him Bhante. There are many respectful ways to call him. It is my personal pleasure to invite Ajahn Amaro to make the keynote speech that you've all been waiting for. Over to you, Bhante.
Can you hear me? Yes. So thank you very much, your venerable friends, your excellencies, and Madam Director General Tatiana Valovia, and so many people who have gathered together to, let's say, join in with this event today. And I'm extremely glad and honored to find out that it was decided to hold this event remotely rather than just cancelling it because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but rather to use the occasion to say reflect upon the Buddha's teachings and how this might benefit us all in the world, say in our own particular lives, and also in the work that we do in the world. So the title that was given to me today to speak on was COVID-19 and it being an opportunity to develop kindness and compassion. So I reflected upon this and I thought, well, one of the things with respect to wholesome qualities are the different speakers have outlined these various different qualities, Madam Director General herself, and then just now Ambassador Sek and the gentleman from Sri Lanka, outlining these very skillful and noble qualities. But just having the idea to be kind or to be compassionate, that doesn't actually create that quality as an abiding presence in our lives. We might wish to be kind and compassionate at all times, but we can't manage that. We get distracted and there are obstacles, difficulties. So having the ideal is one thing, but the actuality of how our hearts, our minds, how our lives are is another. So I thought it might be helpful to speak today about what obstructs those qualities of kindness and compassion, and how we can work with those obstructions to really embody those qualities of kindness and compassion and the other wholesome, skillful attributes that have been mentioned today. So when we say want to be kind to others, when we are say in a situation where we feel we should be kind, sometimes what we experience is there's a feeling of alienation, or that we find ourselves attached to our own views and opinions, so that we would like to be kind to that other person, but they've just got a wrong idea. We feel that they're being foolish, or that how can they think that? That's ridiculous. And so because of our attachment to our own views and feeling of our own rightness, like I'm right, you're wrong, then our own feeling of rightness, even though our opinion might have a lot of validity to it, the very way that our mind is holding it becomes an obstruction. So that we find ourselves being, separated from, we find ourselves alienated and opposing, we find ourselves in a state of contention with others. Also, just the habits that we have, and particularly during this the COVID-19 epidemic, this feelings of insecurity, self-concern, frustration. These are very strong in the lives of ordinary people, whether you are an ordinary citizen, or whether you're in a role of leadership, or say looking after some kind of government department, or representing your nation. And so that we feel those impulses. It's not part of our brief. We're an ambassador, or a doctor, or a Buddhist monk even. It's not part of our brief to feel frustrated and incompetent, or incapable, or irritated. But those feelings arise. So I feel when we speak about loving kindness, it's important to look at the ways that we can get to the root of that and really establish that quality, and not just have it as an ideal, but to embody it as an actuality. So firstly, thinking of loving kindness, Ambassador Sheikh, His Excellency, spoke about some words of Ajahn Sumedho's about patience and tolerance. And this is a way that he liked to represent loving kindness, because one of the things with respect to the word metta, or loving kindness, is that in English the word love tends to imply that we're trying to make ourselves like everything. And Ajahn Sumedho, in his early life as a monk and as a contemplative, he realized you can't really like everything. You can't like everyone, but you can be kind to them. You can't like your unskillful, unwholesome mind states, but you can be kind to them. You don't have to make them into an enemy. So he began to use the phrase, not dwelling in aversion towards other people, not dwelling in aversion towards your own selfishness, your own jealousy, your own fearfulness, your own anger, and so on. So that that I feel is a very skillful way of understanding kindness. Certainly there is the expressive quality of loving kindness, the radiating of benevolence and well-wishing to all beings, and generating that quality towards one's own life. But almost more importantly, there is the receptive quality of kindness as well, which, as I was quoting Ajahn Sumedho, he would say, this is best described as not dwelling in aversion. And another way you can phrase it is a radical acceptance. So whether we like something or don't like it, here it is. This is the way things are, which doesn't imply a passivity, which I'll go on to a little bit towards the end of the talk, but rather it's an opening of the heart to the way things are. It's a recognition of, in this moment, this is the way the world is. So you're not saying that you like it, you're not saying that it should be this way, but you're saying, in this moment, it is this way. This is the nature of things in this moment. So to cultivate loving kindness, I feel that using the principle of radical acceptance, or not dwelling in aversion, that's a touch point that we can use. And again, Mindfulness was spoken of by Her Excellency, the Director General, Madam Tatiana, also others spoken today. That quality of mindfulness is essential in all respects, because mindfulness is the thing that helps us to notice, oh, I'm being hard-hearted, or I'm being judgmental, or I'm getting lost in feelings of alienation, or feeling opinionated. I'm feeling I'm right and you're wrong. The mindfulness is the quality that helps that to be noticed, to be known, and therefore that recognition of, well, here it is. This isn't a beautiful quality, it's not a noble quality, but here it is. And that receptivity then allows the mind to, say, relate to that in a different way, which again I'll speak of in a moment. With respect to compassion, we might want to be compassionate. We see that as a very beautiful, noble quality, and that so much of the work of the United Nations, I mean, just the very name of the organization, United Nations, the whole fabric of the organization is built around establishing and maintaining unity between nations, which is a very compassionate and skillful, wise motivation. But just because that's what we call our motivation, that's what we name it, we want to be compassionate, but we find that we can't be that way. We find ourselves going numb. Sometimes the degree, the extent of difficulty and suffering around us is such that we find ourselves just switching off. You know, I can't bear it. I can't deal with this. So the heart closes down, and we find ourselves going numb with respect to the suffering around us. Or we find ourselves trying to help, but making our efforts to help a compulsive and agitated quality that we can never do enough, and we find our compassion turning into a source of suffering for ourselves and actually disabling our ability to work effectively. So that with respect to compassion, again, I feel it's helpful to look at the way that we can work with our mind moment by moment, or what's the best way of establishing compassion, not just as an ideal, but as a moment-by-moment actuality. But one of the things that I like to speak about in this respect is the degree to which the feelings of I and me and mine come into the picture. This is one of the main, say, principles of Buddhist practice, and I think one of the things that the Buddha's teachings can bring to the world, irrespective of one's spiritual conditioning, the spiritual background, your religious adherence, or without any kind of religious faith or adherence whatsoever, the capacity of the mind to be trained, and that we can work with our minds, and that the way that we relate to our activities, the more that way of working with the mind is free of egotism, free of self-concern, free of self-centeredness, then we can work more effectively. So in our Buddhist language, the Pali language of the southern Buddhist scriptures, we speak of the principle of anatta, or not self, which is not, say, a belief that we don't exist, but rather it means learning how not to be selfish, learning to live a life based on reality, on nature, rather than on self-concern, egotism, and self-centered thinking. So that if we can, say, relate to compassion and compassionate intentions from an unselfish point of view, then that compassionate effort and attitude can be far more effective. So one way of phrasing this, a friend of ours, a student of ours at Abhayagiri Monastery in California, as a lay Buddhist practitioner, teacher, he put this into three different principles, which I like to quote. His name was Kandanya. His lay name, his general name was Barry Kapke. So the first one is, don't push, just use the weight of your own body, which means don't go rushing into situations and try to force things to a particular goal, but lean into them, feel things out to get the right pressure, the appropriate weight and influence engagement in any one moment. The second principle that he liked to encourage was don't diagnose, just be aware. Dr. Gaia was introducing me and talking about some of my background. And so I do have a bit of some scientific conditioning, and I also have a habit of being an explainer. I like to have everything sorted into neat categories and have everything tidily arranged in say, neat and say, describable forms. But life isn't always that way, and sometimes we can rush into diagnosing and explaining and say leading with our thinking mind and not really attending to the whole of a situation. So rather than jumping in too quickly and me say, oh, I understand it, I know what's going on here, I know what's going on here, I know what's happening, to in exactly the same way to be opening the heart, opening the attention to take in all of the different things that are present in anyone's situation. So don't diagnose, just be aware. So that is, in a sense, trusting that the awareness, that opening of the heart, attuning to the whole situation, then draws upon a more profound intelligence, an intuitive wisdom that can guide what's appropriate, what's useful for the situation in a more complete and wholesome way. The third principle is don't try to help, but don't turn away. So an organization like the United Nations, to have a principle like don't try to help seems to be a kind of antithesis of what you're there for. But it's the key point in that sentence is try. The tryingness is the thing that can get in the way. Again, it can be driven by self-view and the habit, me trying to get it right, me trying to do the best thing. And that tryingness, and I take the liberty of quoting Yoda. There was the Star Wars Day, May the 4th, just a few days ago, and I was reminded of this quotation from Yoda, the great sage of those films, where he said, "Don't try, either do or don't do." Not trying. So that habit of trying and efforting based on self-view can be very confusing and obstructive. And again, we don't turn away, but we let go of that tryingness, that efforting and stressing that can go on in the heart. So then again, the work that we do can be informed by a profound mindfulness, a profound attunement to the time, the place, the situation. So then what is neat, when it's time to speak up, we speak up. When it's time to act, we act. When it's time to sit still and be quiet, then we sit still and be quiet. With respect to the current situation, again, a number of people spoke about this, the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown situation. The United Kingdom, we have, I think today, the government will be making further announcements. The reckoning is that we'll have at least another 3 weeks of lockdown protocols in place, and some countries around the world are starting to loosen that up a little bit. But I feel that while this continues, then people are in a situation of retreat. They are in their own homes, their own apartments. Those who are not carrying out essential work are strongly encouraged to stay within our own homes. I haven't physically left the site of Amravati since March the 24th, when the lockdown was instituted, and I haven't actually been off the property for all that time, not once. So I'm observing the lockdown protocols. But it's somewhat depressing to see that people trying to just find ways to distract themselves, people in the lockdown consuming more alcohol, or just going through the entire Netflix catalogue of movies. Not that I'm anti watching movies, I was just quoting Star Wars, but that way of trying to fill up the time, doing jigsaws, or just finding ways to burn the hours. But I feel this is a very, say, unfortunate way of approaching what might be a rich opportunity. And so the qualities of mindfulness and the spiritual, say, attributes of kindness and compassion, and the qualities that Ambassador Sheikh was talking about, the patience, khanti, and also the iddhipada, the basis of success, to develop those qualities. One of the most powerful tools that we can use, and this is effective regardless of our spiritual background, our religious adherence, or say our secular approach, is the development of meditation and mindfulness. This really is not something that Buddhism has a monopoly on, and I feel can and has been effectively used by people from every disposition, every background all around the world. And the lockdown situation that we have is an ideal opportunity to take time to learn how to meditate. And one of the most important things, and the role of Buddhism and the recognition of Buddhism's contribution to the well-being of the world, and to the support of the qualities that, in a sense, embody human goodness. A lot of it comes from and is supported by, is nourished by meditation practice, the development of mindfulness. And this is based upon the principle that we can train the mind. It's a little bit different in Asia with backgrounds, particularly in the Buddhist countries, but in other spiritual traditions as well. But in the West, there's a strong tradition or an understanding of the mind as being like a kind of a sponge that can absorb ideas, it can absorb information, and you can squeeze out the sponge and it can produce ideas or fresh objects, fresh ideas. But the idea of training the mind and making the mind work in a different way, training the mind to see the world in a different way, to see your own life in a different way, that's a bedrock of Buddhist practice. And I feel one of the great gifts that Buddhist teachings can bring to the world in general, that the mind is trainable. It is not just a passive thing. It's not just a box that you can collect information in and then get the information out, or the information can be arranged to create fresh ideas. But rather, the mind can be trained. And again, as was mentioned, it's without any recourse to any external agencies. The Buddha's approach was far more a self-help program, really. It was that we can work with our own nature, our own minds, and that mind can be trained. It can see the world. It can know the world in a radically different way. And so I would say that one of the greatest outcomes or the benefits of Buddhist practice, meditation, and mindfulness that we can use is what we would call in our Buddhist terminology, right understanding, of seeing the world in its true light, seeing the world free from biases of our language, our preferences, our fears, our desires, our aversions, our conditioning, to recognize the influence of our nationality, our gender, our age, our situation, but for the way that the world is seen, and known, not to be dominated by that, but to be able to see things in their true light. So in terms of meditation and the value of it, and using the lockdown situation as an opportunity to practice meditation, it's really based on that trainability, that the mind can be trained. So first of all, one of the most helpful teachings of the Buddha, he talks about his own life before he was enlightened. He talked about his own meditation, and he said he divided his thoughts into two categories: those which were wholesome and noble and beneficial, and those which are unwholesome and confusing and destructive. And he said those which he saw were wholesome and beneficial, that he took those and sustained those, maintained those, and those that he saw that were confusing or destructive or harmful, then he left those aside. So what this is pointing to is we might feel like a victim of our thoughts, and that our minds just go their own way, but from the Buddhist perspective, we're not. We can make choices. And if we take the opportunity to sit down, to watch the mind, then we can train that faculty of recognizing what is wholesome and beneficial, what is freeing and liberating, what is unwholesome, what is confusing, what is harmful, what is difficult. We can make that discrimination. We can discern those difference of qualities, and we can train the mind in this way. So again, mindfulness is a key tool in this respect. It's the essential element. One of the things that the Buddha said about mindfulness, he said it's like, people might not agree with this, but he said that like salt improves the flavor of every curry, and a good prime minister benefits every state, so too mindfulness is beneficial in every situation. So some of the doctors amongst you might say, don't encourage people to take salt. But in a figurative sense, I think it is still valid. But certainly, I think we would all agree when there is a skillful political leadership, then everybody benefits from that. So with respect to mind training, then this is really what leads to peace. When we talk about having, say, a peace, a quality of peace in our lives, it's not just an inner, say, an inner attitude of peacefulness or calmness in ourselves. It also relates to peaceful relationships with the people in our families, people around us, people in the workplace, peace between nations, people, say, learning how to get along with each other. The more we can understand and train our own mind to really know the roots of peace and to establish that, then the more we're able to establish peace in the home, peace in the workplace, peace in the nation, and peace in the world. So in terms of meditation, and we have various different methods and techniques, but essentially, just as Madam Director General was saying, it all hinges on paying attention. I was very impressed with the depth of her knowledge of Buddhist teachings. So, Madam Director General, I'm very touched by your understanding and your your ability to explain and emphasize those qualities of Buddhist teaching, and that the mindfulness is really the only way to learn. And so when we watch our mind, take that time alone, not just to be distracting ourselves, but to watch the mind, see how it works, and then to see that the way that we steer the mind, that creates a direction for the future. And this, again, was one of the points the Buddha made in that same teaching. You know, that which the mind frequently dwells upon and ponders upon, that will be the direction that the mind tends to take. So if we see that something is unskillful, unhelpful, confusing, and we let it go, then the mind is less likely to go down that track. The more that we see something is beneficial and helpful, is liberating, then the more that the mind is likely to go down that track. Now, another aspect of meditation is dealing with what you can call, or we call in our vernacular, our kind of Buddhist say slang, is conceptual proliferation, or papancha in Pali. Often the mind is just running along, just one thought chasing after another, after another, after another. This is conceptual proliferation. So the more that we are able to, say, train the mind to focus in the present, to, say, to let go of its distractions, the mental complications that it creates, then the heart will be free of that conceptual proliferation. This isn't stifling our imagination, but rather freeing the mind from that compulsive habit of thinking, so that we are able to do our best thinking in a way when it is free from that, say, chattering and random complicating habit that we have. So to train the mind to pay attention to the present and to, say, whenever the mind is following that kind of conceptual proliferation, chasing off into memories, into expectations, worries, blaming, criticizing, regretting, that the mind can be trained to not follow that, to not pursue that, but to come back to the present and to know this moment, the field of experience as we know it here and now. And so that the more that we train the mind to do that, then the more essentially we learn how not to just believe the content of our own thoughts, because as we watch the mind and train the attention to stay with the present, that doesn't mean to say we don't have a schedule. I think all of us have probably got calendars filled to a very substantial degree. Doesn't mean we don't make plans, but you don't attach to ideas of the future. You don't attach to hopes and fears, but you realize the present is the only place where we can genuinely make a difference in our life. And if the mind is dwelling in its memories of the past or its plans for the future, it is missing the present, and this is where life happens. So this is where we can make a difference. And in the present, we receive the effects of all actions and experiences of the past. They are received here into the open heart. There's a radical acceptance of what has come before. And then with mindfulness, we can then plant the seeds of wholesomeness and benefit, so that then we create causes for beneficial results in the future. And so that the more that the mind is free from chasing after those conceptual proliferations, then the more it is able to work effectively in the present. So one of the strange things about our mind, our ways of thinking and relating is, for most of us, we assume that if we think something, it is true. And if somebody thinks differently, then they're wrong. They might be a good person, but they're somewhat deluded. That is a bit of a sweeping statement, I realize, but that's often how we function. Yeah, if I think it is true, and even if I think differently this year than the way I did last year, I was right then, I'm still right now, even though it might be different from what I was thinking before. So it's a ridiculous, kind of crazy way to operate. So part of the training in meditation is to understand that not all of the contents of our thoughts are true or meaningful or realistic. A lot of it is just a random replaying of perceptions, of memories, of impressions from TV programs or movies or YouTube videos or conversations. It's random chatter of the mind. And I'm not rejecting the idea that thoughts can be useful and can be meaningful, but if we watch the mind, we recognize that a lot of the content of our thoughts is not meaningful, it's not useful, it's not in tune with reality. So just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. And that is also a way of establishing a genuine peace in the heart. Now, when we talk about peace, sometimes that is, say, assumed to mean a kind of passivity, that I'm just thinking about peace for myself, and therefore there's a switching off. At this time, as also was referred to by several of the other speakers, there's enormous, not just the COVID pandemic around the world, but there's enormous political inequalities, inequities. There's, say, tremendous, physical difficulties experienced by many populations, situations of conflict, warfare. The virus is causing situations where there's threats of great famine, as well as the illness. And so that there's a lot of suffering in the world and a lot of difficulty. So speaking about peace doesn't mean a kind of switching off. I'm just going to go into my little inner bubble and be peaceful inside and they ignore the way the world is. Not at all. Again, as many of the earlier speakers say addressed, that one of the great gifts of Buddhism is it's say the manifestation of the good heart in terms of caring for others. That as the Madam Director General said, that principle of you can't be happy unless other beings are really cared for. So that sense of peace doesn't mean switching off. It doesn't mean an individual isolation, but rather it's an inner clarity, and that the peace doesn't come from just switching off or making everything calm down or go away, but rather the peace is in the right understanding. It's in the right attitude. The peace is in the subject rather than in the object. It's the attitude towards things where the real quality of peace. You're not waiting for the world to sit down and be still before you can be peaceful. Rather, the quality of peace is in the attitude. So reflecting on this, I think it's good to understand that peace is, and the work of meditation, it's like physical fitness. So say if you're training to be a runner or you're to be an athlete, like a pole vaulter or a gymnast, you train the body in various strengths. So meditation is training the mind. It's like a kind of mental training. It is really very, very comparable to that. So that the more that the mind is trained and say skilled in the quality of focusing attention, of understanding the nature of experience and not being confused or identified or attached to the patterns of experience that are known. It's rather like being an athlete at the peak of their fitness. You can run 20 kilometers and it's easy for you. You're not pushed or stressed to do that. You can pole vault over a high bar, 3 or 4 meters and the agility and strength that is needed to do a pole vault, or doing the floor exercises, or the parallel bars for a gymnast, the extraordinary agility and strength that's needed, that's what you've got, because that's your discipline. So meditation and the peace that comes from meditation, it's an energetic peace, like the skill of an athlete, the endurance and the flexibility, the agility of an athlete. They come from hours and hours and hours of training and discipline. Similarly, meditation, if we use the time of the lockdown and the limitations that we have to develop meditation practice, to learn to watch the mind and to develop the skillful qualities of mind, then we'll develop that kind of peacefulness. Our mind will be, say, guided towards a greater peacefulness, but it's a peace which is, say, not divorced from our work in the world. It's not a peace of separateness, but rather it's a peace that comes from perfect attunement. It's an energetic peace. And so that in the challenging lives that we have, and many of you are right out there in the front lines of trying to help large populations of people. You're in positions of great responsibility, and you have a lot of authority that it's been put into your hands to exercise. That I would say that I encourage that the opportunity that we have to use the lockdown period and the particular time of retreat that is bestowed upon us to say, see if what I'm saying is true, see to find out if it is possible to train the mind, if that quality of peace really does come from learning to let go of the unskillful, to cultivate the skillful, to focus the attention on the present moment, and then to see what the effect of learning to not be attached to the content of our thoughts and our emotions, but rather to know them as passing formations, and to see for yourself that if we are able to train the mind in this way, mysteriously we find that we are actually able to work much more effectively. We can do more and better. We become more competent in the world by working on our inner world. I would suggest that please do take these words and to try them, test them out, try them out for yourselves, and to see if they do indeed have any validity. One of the other principles of Buddhism is that Buddhist teachings are not given as a kind of declaration of absolute truth, but rather they are offered for consideration. So these words that I've spoken today and the encouragement that I'm giving for us all to say, take the opportunity to say, get to know the capacities we have, to develop the capacities that we have, to see for yourself whether it's true. And if some of my words are useful and good, then take them and use them. If some of them are incorrect or not useful, then please leave them aside. So it's in this spirit that I speak, that these are offered for reflection. And so please try it out for yourself. And I sincerely hope that there are beneficial results that come from this.
Thank you very much, Bhante. A lot of food for thought, and we're going to continue discussing in the panel as well. Thank you very much. I wanted to just make a point here. So Bhante talked about meditation, and in fact the Buddha's teaching is really interesting because you can summarize it after the analysis of how the world works. You can summarize it to train your mind. If there's one thing you should do, you should train your mind. And now we see all around us in the 20th and the 21st century, people really focusing on meditation. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge the history, why it took so long for Buddhism to come to the West. One of the issues was language. Buddhism is passed down as an oral tradition amongst the monastics from generation to generation, from teacher to student. And it was only in the late 1800s when the British had colonized Sri Lanka. There are many negative sides to colonization, but one interesting aspect was that all civil servants were required to learn the local language. and a few civil servants went above and beyond. And William Rice Davis and two others actually decided they would also not only learn the local language Sinhala, but they would also look at the Pali language, which is an ancient language, roughly equivalent to Latin for English, in which all of the Buddhist teachings were. And in fact, the Pali Text Society was established in 1881. And there is a connection because the Pali Text Society managed to translate into English and to bring to the West the teachings of the Buddha. And there were many individuals as well beyond the Pali Text Society. Why I mentioned the Pali Text Society is that Ajahn Amaro's second cousin was the 5th president of the Pali Text Society, I.B. Horner, and she was instrumental in this as well. So there is actually a thread through history, 2,500, nearly 2,600 years of oral tradition, and then in Buddhist countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, and others, and particularly what we call Theravada Buddhism, is the school of the elders, where we believe the original teachings were protected and passed on. It was only in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century that the knowledge was available in the West. So I wanted to acknowledge Ajahn Amaro's lineage and his family's contribution to our understanding of this. And we will talk about meditation and other tools as we go into the panel discussion. So it is time to introduce to you, of course, Ajahn Amaro is invited into the panel, 3 additional really distinguished and very generous speakers. The first is Dr. Sunil Karana. If you just wave, Dr. Sunil, so people can see you. Dr. Sunil is a Sri Lankan originally, he's a Buddhist, but he took studying Pali and linguistics to another level. He started off as assistant lecturer in the University of Kelaniya in linguistics at the beginning of his career. He's had academic achievements in the University of Ottawa, where he got his master's degree, and most distinguished is at Cornell. He got his PhD on cognitive neuroscience and theoretical linguistics. For the last 12 years, he has been the Buddhist chaplain to Her Majesty's Armed Forces in the UK. Now, when I first heard this, my mind shook a little bit and I was surprised, but it's a very, very interesting role and responsibility. He's also the director of Kalyana Mitra. It's a Buddhist chaplain support group. He has many other achievements, but I think I will stop there and welcome Dr. Sunil to the panel. I'm going to introduce the others as well. Welcome, Sunil. Next is Reverend Peniel Rajkumar. If you can wave or unmute just so that we can see where you are. You're going to speak soon. That's fine, Reverend. He leads the interreligious dialogue and cooperation amongst communities in the World Council of Churches, which is an ecumenical organization based in Geneva. And they're very good friends with the International Buddhist Foundation as well. His job is building relations and trust between communities in the service of justice and peace. He's the author of several books and articles, served as an associate professor of Christian social ethics in India, and he is a former Anglican priest, formerly serving in London, but he's now resident in Geneva, and we're fortunate to have him. Welcome, Reverend. And the third panelist is somebody I also know I have benefited from her wisdom personally. She's Rosella Pinn. She's a coach, and she's actually a master coach, accredited with the International Coach Federation, and she's a teacher at the International Coach Academy. She provides services and coaching to individuals, teams, and institutions. And this week, Rosella, is International Coaching Week, where coaches are supposed to give back. And she's going to talk about how Buddhism relates also to her profession. So welcome, 3 panelists and Venerable Amaro, so the 4 of you. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask each of you a question in turns. We're going to be quite concise. I may have a little time at the end, so if anybody has a question, you can write for whom you have the question and write the question in the chat, and Lalanta is going to pose it to the panel right at the end. So just to get the conversation started, Ajahn Amaro, let me start with you. You talked about meditation as being a tool. And earlier, the Secretary of Foreign Relations of Sri Lanka, he talked about a silver lining. You know, there's terrible things happening, but at the same time, there is an opportunity to develop ourselves and develop our minds. Can you talk a little bit more about what other tools are available to people? And also to elaborate, when lots of people want to meditate, lots of people think it's a good idea, but there are things that get in the way. What advice do you have for beginners? Over to you.
How long do I have?
Well, you're the chief guest. You can take longer, but I'd really like 3-4 minutes, if that's okay.
Yes. Well, probably the simplest and most accessible form of meditation for most people is what we call mindfulness of breathing. And particularly if it's something that is not familiar to people, or also if they have they're locked down not just with themselves, but they've got other family members around, then it's good to just take small chunks of time. So I would suggest just 5 or 10 minutes just to be blocking out for oneself, and to use the natural flow of the breath as a focal point. So I won't go into the details of meditation guidance, but essentially it's deliberately putting everything else aside for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, the list of the demands from the world can wait for 5 minutes. And in this, with this period of time, the only thing I'm interested in, right at the center of my attention, I place the natural rhythm of the breath. That's not because the breath is particularly sort of symbolically sacred or anything, but it's a calming rhythm. You don't have to create it. It's happening on its own. It's ever present, and it's part of the body's intrinsic system, so that it's aligned to the present reality. It's not something that has to be imagined or remembered. It's here. So just bring the attention to the breath, and then when the mind gets distracted, you feel excited about something that's supposed to happen later in the day, or you feel outraged with some conversation that you had earlier on, you realize, oh, I'm remembering. Okay, let go. Oh, I'm planning, I'm imagining. Let go. Watching the mind following a pattern of distraction, recognizing the tension of that distraction, and then consciously letting go, and then coming back to the rhythm of the breath. And that simple process, that's kind of it. There's not much more to it than that, because you're training the mind to know how distraction works, and you're also beginning to use that faculty of training the mind, that you can train the mind to see things differently, to know things differently. You can develop those muscles. And so in the period of 5 minutes, at first it might be astonishing just how many times the mind can run away after different objects, and that can be a bit daunting, but this is standard procedure. Same for most people. Just very patiently, just as soon as you realize the mind has grabbed something, let go, come back, begin again. And then just, again, not to be too heroic, just take 5-10 minutes at a time when the rest of the family or the other occupants of the flat or the house are quiet. Early in the morning is often good, yeah, before everyone else wakes up. And that's a very simple, accessible tool that anybody can use. And also, you said what other tools are available? Just developing an ongoing mindfulness. So just noticing, what's your body doing? Are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you walking? Are you lying down? Are you feeling hot? Are you feeling cold? Are you feeling tense? Are you feeling relaxed? How does the body feel right now? What's the mood right now? So that ongoing mindfulness, you don't have to make any commentary about it, or I should be this way, I shouldn't be that way. Just that, oh, I'm feeling sad, or oh, I'm feeling kind of peaceful, or oh, I'm feeling exhausted. And just to be noticing, consciously aware of the flow of feeling. Because again, like there was the comment about Anicca, the Secretary of Foreign Relations in Sri Lanka, spoke about. This is giving us a teaching about uncertainty and change. It's also extremely informative just how much our moods, our thoughts change during the course of the day, how much our body changes during the course of each day, so that is again strengthening that mindfulness muscle, getting that into say into action and learning to watch how our whole system is working, and the power of awareness that was also referred to earlier today. That is the balancing, the integrating agent, that knowing what's going on, how the mind is, how the body is, how the heart is, then that very knowing is the integrative agent.
Thank you very much. I move over to Dr. Sunil now. Dr. Sunil, I read a little about you, and I understand, I mean, although in my prejudiced and ignorant mind, I couldn't understand what this job was. I think that it was really an act of compassion to take care of the mental well-being and the health of people. And you were selected. It wasn't just an appointment, it was quite a difficult thing to get. So congratulations on the honor that you have. I want to take you, and I'd like you to focus in the next 4 or 5 minutes on the issue of anxiety. So central to the Buddha's teaching is this concept of dukkha, anxiety, unsatisfactoriness, and so on. But you must see anxiety in its many forms. How could you explain to our audience here what can you draw from Buddhist teachings to deal with anxiety? Over to you, Doctor.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So what a great honor to be able to address the United Nations from your own humble home through your phone. So I feel really honored. With regard to Dr. Daya's question, and I think one of the great things about Buddhism, and I think we all learn as we unpack the Buddhist teaching, is that the Buddhism always teaches us to turn all the challenges into opportunity. And whatever the challenge, I think this is the story of Prince Siddhartha and even the Buddha himself, who could actually turn all challenges. Now, what were the challenges that he faced when he was the Prince Siddhartha? He wanted to actually find out the meaning of life, why we all get ill, get sick, and get old and die one day. And that was his challenge. And until he actually was drawn into the last breath of his life, I mean, basically he was facing all challenges. And what was really remarkable was, Buddhism teaches us, through his life story and his teachings, how to turn these challenges into opportunity. And so one of the things in my job, what I really learn about is these, challenges. The British forces, I work across 3 British forces. There are about 5,000 serving Buddhists in the British Armed Forces. I've been doing this job for the last 15 years. And I have actually found that, people, and amazing people who can turn any challenge into an opportunity, not to mention this actually 100-year-old Captain Tom Moore. You may have actually watched him, and he started he wanted to raise £1,000 for the NHS, National Health Service, and he said, I will walk one stretch from in my garden from one side to the other, and you pay £1. And his target was £1,000. And the man ended up with 30 million plus pounds, actually donations for the NHS. In this time, as Venerable Ajahn very correctly mentioned, we are trying to see how to burn our hours in the lockdown. And here was a man, 100-year-old, who actually decided to do something for the NHS. And that is really an inspiring, inspiring moment and a person. So I was actually thinking of of the Salla Sutta, where the Buddha talks about, actually in the Samyutta Nikaya, when somebody is actually hit by an arrow, one has a choice to to take that arrow and cure the wound, or you could actually take the same arrow and inflict any number of times of pain on you. And I think that is a great, the Buddha says, uninformed worldlings tend to actually inflict so much sorrow upon oneself and others because of our ignorance. And the Buddha says, actually, when somebody has a physical discomfort, illness, for example, what happens is what follows is the anxiety, stress that is caused by that illness. And if we do not know how to handle that stress and that anxiety, we can actually create more and more stress and make even the physical health so difficult. And I think one thing that we learn in these last few months of this virus is that the anxiety, the stress that it has created, and the grief because of the loss of loved ones, and in the UK, almost 30,000 people in every family, and see the number of people who are grieving. And when these things are overwhelmingly coming to you, and we can be actually further buried and sometimes be in a very difficult mental state. But what Buddhism actually suggests is, rather than plunging into more and more difficulty with these things, we should actually learn the ropes, as Venerable Ajahn Amaro was pointing out. Just actually staying calm, and that is actually very first most important characteristic in Buddhism. What meditation teaches us is giving us the ability to stay calm. When you are when anybody is recruited for an emergency service, the first thing they actually look at you is how good are you in staying calm in a difficult situation. In adversities, we tend to actually panic, and sometimes we can create more and more anxiety. And what I have seen with our serving personnel, and it's amazing, people. Sometimes, if and if you can see, if you can hear your enemy, it is sometimes easier to fight the enemy. Now our serving personnel are fighting an enemy that cannot be seen, cannot be heard, and cannot even fathom what it looks like, and where it is going to take us all. But with all these difficulties, the frontline staff, NHS staff, and all of these people doing their part, and collectively, and then even ourselves, staying home and being responsible, we are playing a huge role in all of this. And that actually staying calm and doing every good can be so helpful and so beneficial. And these are actually the qualities that all the speakers were pointing to, establishing patience, tolerance, understanding, mindfulness, and so on. So I think there are actually so much in the toolkit of a Buddhist to work with.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. Yes, so we are really just trying to, we are skimming the surface of something really, really profound, but thank you so much. Thank you for those who are sending in questions. We're going to go to that in a moment. Lalanta will let us know. Rosella, I'd like to go to you, because both the speakers are talking about really developing your own mind, going inside, and I know I'm also a coach, that the concept of you being empowered to develop yourself is very important to coaching. So for the coach and the coachee. Can you share with us, Rosella, as a coach, how do you relate to some of these concepts in Buddhism that we've talked about, whether it's going inside, whether it's loving kindness, compassion, whatever you think is relevant? Over to you.
Many thanks. And many thanks for welcoming at this event and in your community. Well, I was impressed during this conversation on how many of those concepts, the Buddhist teaching, have been integrated into the competency of a coach. So I was playing with all the inputs and I put them in the competencies framework. And I noticed how, while we are developing our coaching competencies, actually we are honoring many of the Buddhist concepts. So I want to go through quickly. And first of all, when we get into a coaching relationship, we honor the other person. So we acknowledge what he is, we accept the other person entirely. And we don't push, as Ajahn Amaro was saying, we don't push anything. We respect the peace of the other person. And we invite them to focus on what is relevant to them. So we learn how to release our need to help in order to serve the need of the other. And how we do that? Through active listening, a compassionate listening, which is made of silence, respecting the client thoughts, but also leaving space for the client to really process all their thoughts. And then we invite them to focus on what is really serving them and relevant to them. And by doing that, we then challenge their own perspectives. So I really appreciate what Ajahn Amaro is saying about what is beneficial and destructive. So we invite the other people and ourselves as coaches to focus on what is beneficial to us in the moment and what we can take action on, which means sometimes, a lot of time, also just being. And then we are really open in our communication. And by being open means also making ourselves vulnerable and not be attached in giving advices, not being attached to our own opinions, but simply allowing the person to see what is already in them, as we have already seen what we have in us. And this brings that beautiful concept of awareness that has been mentioned so many times. And then there is something, again, is the learning that we gain from that awareness and how we learn how to use it. Obviously here, I noticed from all those teaching, there is a lot of working by yourself. In coaching, we do it together. So there is this sense of community and working together, because doing it with another person, that person becomes the mirror of what you are discovering about yourself. And through that being a mirror, we also learn a lot about ourselves. And we might be triggered by many things. And so after each conversation, we need to work again on ourselves, going inside and discover what has been triggered in me. And this allows us to be enlightened by something. So I would say, then I would add something that has been mentioned several times by Ajahn Amaro is discipline. What we work a lot in coaching is to our own discipline of being present for our clients, and then inviting also our clients to be disciplined in their thoughts, in how they use their thoughts, and also in how they put in practice anything they've learned about themselves. So I see so much that I'm quite impressed. It's amazing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
And I didn't mention Rosella is based in Italy, and
Oh yeah.
the center of the epidemic was really felt in Italy, and Italy's had the longest lockdown. So I also want to appreciate what she has been doing to help others. And like Dr. Sunil and Venerable Ajahn and our next speaker, these are all helping professions, if you like. These are all people who use their knowledge from different specialities, different backgrounds, but are in the service of others. And therefore, all of the concepts like kindness, compassion, these become really universal values. Thank you, Rosella, so much. Next is Reverend Peniel Rajakumar. Reverend, if I may ask you, as a Christian and as a ordained priest, what is it? Is there anything that you can take from Buddhist teachings to support your own spirituality in your own belief system of Christianity? Over.
Thank you. Let me begin by acknowledging how grateful I am to be here with you all as you celebrate this auspicious feast of Vesak. Well, I think a fruitful entry point for me to this question would be to reflect on those aspects of Christianity and Buddhism which resonate with each other. And if I have to speak of a foundation for my reflection, I would be drawn to the Metta Sutta, which calls for the cultivation of a boundless heart towards all beings. Yeah, where it says, let one's thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world, above, below, and across without any abstraction. And I see some resonances of that in the Christian call to love God and one's neighbor as oneself. So this threefold focus on the love of God, the love of neighbors, and also of the self is something that I find to be a point of resonance. And if I talk about people from within the Christian tradition who have found practices of Buddhism useful for their own personal spirituality, I'm drawn to the example of the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Archbishop Rowan Williams, who once spoke about how Buddhist mindfulness helps him in his own prayer life. And he reflected on it from a theological perspective, and this is what he had to say, and I quote his words. He says, if you want me to speak theologically about the radical attention to the present, as he puts it, he says that it's a time when you're aware of your body as simply a place where life happens. A time when you're aware of your body as simply a place where life happens, and he says, where therefore God happens. So that radical attention to the body at the present is something that he claims to have helped him in his own spiritual tradition. And I also see resonances between the fourfold principles of metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. And it is hard to deny these the connections between these principles and what we Christians call as the fruit of the Spirit, which includes love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So there are resonances that help us also deepen our own Christian perspectives. And to these, I would also add two more that the Buddha calls our attention to: the principles of prajna, the attention to wisdom, and also the principle of dana, generosity, especially at a time like this. I think it is this deep discernment as also this deep generosity which helps us to overcome suffering in all forms in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you very much. We've got lots of questions coming in, so it's very interesting. Lalanta, do you want to read one or two?
Yes, of course, Gaya. Thank you very much. It seems like we are receiving a lot of questions in the chat. The very first question that I got is from Jimmy. His question is, what is the best way to let go? How to let go according to Buddhism? Thank you.
Jimmy and another participant has asked, so, okay, fine, let go. How do we let go? Let go as no self, or another is, so my question is how to let go as no self or another, and the other was how to let go. So if I can ask Ajahn Amaro to respond to that. We can't hear you. Lalanta, will you try to,
Okay.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, this is it.
So yes, well, it's interesting. The same question came to Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
So the same question came to the mind of my teacher Ajahn Sumedho when he was a very young in the tradition as a novice more than 50 years ago, and he was sitting in his little hut in the forest in Nongkai, thinking, let go, let go, let go. He keeps talking about let go. How do you let go? So what he did was he picked up something in his room. I've got a pen here. Said, okay, so I'm clinging to this. I'm holding tightly to it. So okay, now I'm clinging. So how do I let go? So he actually used the physical experience. In a way, it's interesting how much that relates to both Dr. Rowan Williams's comment and yours, Reverend, that it's like the physical experience of clinging. So he kind of clutched onto this object and held it tight and said, okay, so now how does this feel? Well, there's tension and agitation in my arm. So letting go. Now, does that mean I throw it away or I break it? No, it's letting go is it's just a relaxing. That's what letting go means. So if I relax my grip, then the arm stops shaking, the agitation disappears. There's no problem with holding. And if I need to put it down, I can put it down. If I need to pick it up, I can pick it up. So letting go is best understood in a way as a sort of physical experience. Okay, it's that word clinging or attachment. It's describing what the hand does, and it's the mind is doing a similar thing. It clings to opinions. It clings to memories. It clings to fears and hopes and such like. So the most helpful access point is the body. So when we find the mind attaching, clinging to an opinion, to sense desire, to aversion, to fear, to an idea of the past, to feel that sense of tension in the body. Where does that clinging sit? And for most people, emotional states almost always have some kind of physical attribute. So when you notice that quality of clinging, feel the tension in the body and then relax the body. Say if it's a feeling of anxiety or fear, it's often a tightness in the abdomen, down in the solar plexus. So when you're worried, when you're afraid, you bring your attention to that clinging, that attachment is often of tightness. Then if you relax the body, just let your abdomen soften, let the stomach swell. This is the abs of jelly rather than abs of steel. So just let the abdomen soften, and then notice what happens to that feeling of clinging, of attachment. Where is it? How does it feel now? And so maybe that person still needs to be spoken to, or maybe that debt is still unpaid, or maybe that issue still needs to be discussed. But the problematic nature of it is changed. That has dissolved to some degree. So that, and again, maybe picking up on that aspect of anatta, in this way, it can be seen as, in a way, it's not a personal process. It's like, I didn't invent the force of gravity. I don't think of my gravity. And so that, in a way, the capacity of the mind to cling, it's not personal, it's just a natural habit. We don't have to take it personally. And so that by recognizing, rather than I'm clinging, I'm attached, I've got a problem with grasping, this is the feeling of grasping. It brings agitation and tension. If it's relaxed, the agitation, the tension dissolves. Aha. And then, as I was saying earlier, when that relaxation has happened, it doesn't mean to say you just go to sleep or disconnect. You can actually make better decisions. You can see more clearly because of that clinging having dissolved, that the letting go has happened.
Thank you very much. Lalanta?
Thank you very much, Bante and Gaya. Next, Iran ambassador has a question. Actually, he would like to speak. Ambassador?
Yes, hello, do you hear me?
We do.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ambassador.
Yeah. Thank you very much for arranging this virtual meeting. I personally benefited a lot from the presentations and it's good to use the opportunity and get familiar with the other faiths and beliefs and try to understand each other. Particularly, we are from the same region. Most of the Buddhists and Muslims are in Asia. And we think that in the multilateralism era, there is a need for more and more understanding of each other. And I think the UN resolutions and international fora will provide such opportunities for us to get together more and try to talk to each other. And certainly such kind of gatherings will contribute a lot to maintain peace and security around the globe. I would like to thank the presenters for their excellent presentations, and it was very useful. Almost all of them, when they spoke, they talked about peace, friendship, generosity, and patience, tolerance in Buddhism. But at the same time, there are several questions for me which are related to each other. They spoke about these elements that I mentioned. So what is the viewpoint of Buddhism about the engagement of Buddhists in war and conflicts? Is there any ruling? What kind of elements could justify resorting to war and conflict in Buddhism? Is there any religious ruling in this regard? And also my last question, what is the rules of Buddhism on how to treat non-Buddhists? I really appreciate.
Thank you, Ambassador. Venerable Amaro, I'm going to start. Dr. Sunil, if you also want to supplement afterwards, please be ready. Venerable Amaro.
Yeah, this is a very, very common question, so thank you, Your Excellency, for asking this. In terms of the Buddha's teaching, the very first precept that any practicing Buddhist is, say, using to guide their life is, I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. So you cannot kill in the name of the Buddha, and so there's nothing in the Buddha's teaching that justifies the deliberate taking of life. To my knowledge, I've never seen it. I've been a monk for more than 40 years, and so that is very much embodied. And as our reverend friend was saying, that in the Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness, some of the words of the Buddha in that are, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So the foundation is a respect for all life. And so there's within the Buddha's teaching, there's no concept of a just war and such like. That doesn't mean to say that all countries that have, say, built themselves around Buddhist teachings have never fought other countries, because the political domain is one thing and the religion is another. So that even in the Buddha's time, there were leaders, King Bimbisara, King Pasenadi, Vajjian Confederacy, that were say contemporaries of the Buddha and were devoted disciples of the Buddha, but they never dissolved their armies, and they still managed to engage in conflicts. And so that what you have is a kind of the presence of the teaching, and the religion, it does its best to inform the leadership in society, and the principles are there and the political leaders and the people constituting the society are encouraged to follow those values, but the the religion doesn't take political leadership. So that as a monastic, I'm not allowed to even vote. We're not allowed to take sides with political parties. So the Buddha established it so that the religion should stand outside of the political arena and be a presence which can help inform all different political parties, all different groups. So it's a spiritual resource, just as it was being said earlier, you know, that mindfulness and goodness are things that can benefit everybody. So that the Buddha tried to set things up so that the monastic order and the teachings were not partisan. They were available for everybody. So within a monastery, you'll get people who are very conservative, right-wing people. You get people, members of the military. You get people who are very left-wing, very green, you know, dreadlocked, green, environmental protesters, and everybody. And everyone can feel welcome. So there's no partisan quality, because the aim is for the spiritual teachings to be accessible and an informative presence for everybody. Unfortunately, sometimes individuals will co-opt the teaching and say, we're doing this in the name of the Buddha. But I would say that's actually against, the Buddha would never agree to that. I mean, I'm second guessing the Buddha, but doing things in the name of a spiritual teacher that would go counter to that teacher's own, say, values is not uncommon. That's happened not just in the Buddhist world, it happens in the Christian world, and yeah, I think certainly in all around the planet that has happened amongst human societies, where you have the impetus of competition, say the kind of greed for resources, and various other things that drive conflict and warfare. And so that I would say that Buddhism has not been free from being misused, and things have been done in the name of Buddhism. But in terms of the teaching, you cannot take life. You can't go to war in the name of the Buddha. That's technically impossible. If someone says that they're doing that, then that's their own version of Buddhism. I would respectfully say.
Thank you, Ambassador. Sunil, did you want to add a sentence or two?
That really requires a long discussion, Ambassador, and I think as a chaplain to the armed forces, I get asked the same question over and over again. You know, we have about 5,000 serving Buddhists in the armed forces and doing really amazing work, mostly humanitarian and so on. So, and is it okay for the Buddhists to serve in the military is another question. And very briefly, and I think Buddhism is not a black and white, you know. It doesn't try to resolve issues in a black and white way. And the Buddha has very clear understanding, being in the Aryan, you know, actually the ruling class, the role of a government and the military and so on. As Acham very correctly pointed out, all Buddhist nations do have militaries, and they have to fight wars as well. I mean, you know, Buddhist nations as well. So, and I think the clear distinction here is use of force and use of violence are two different things. And, you know, mostly people do not make this distinction clearly. In Buddhism, the karma is, you know, is about your intention rather than your action. You know, your action matters, but the intention is more important. And you know, sometimes, you know, the militaries have to use force to keep peace itself. And I have seen actually a lot of the time, sometimes they have to take some strong action, but that doesn't mean. The Buddhism always keeps the moral, ethical bar very high. And I have never seen a soldier, you know, whether it is Buddhist or not, joining a military for waging a war or with a killer instinct. So you know, and it really does understand the pragmatics, you know, ground level pragmatics of situations. So therefore, violence is always when you are driven by those unwholesome qualities. And I think, sometimes people have to take tough action, hard action in situations. So maybe we can have a UN session on the subject.
Good, thank you. I think the whole point is to be provocative and to understand, so we often say there's no peace when there's no justice, but there's also no peace when, spirituality and materiality are not aligned. And in the mundaneness of life, we see these conflicts of ideas, not just of nations. Thank you, Ambassador. That was very thought-provoking. I appreciate it. I do want to keep to time. I just want the speakers to know there are lots of questions and people are coming in. Thank you, Rosella. You're answering them on the chat. So we can read out some of the questions. So in your final summaries, you can address them if you so wish. We'll make sure that everybody gets this. I do acknowledge that there is the Ambassador of Venezuela who would like to ask a question. Ambassador, if you could keep it to a limited time, I would really appreciate it. You have the floor.
Honorable Tatiana Valovaya, Director General of the UN, Mr. Ravianta Arjasinana, Secretary of Foreign Relations of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mrs. Tajani Mendes, Deputy Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka. Excellent presentation for you. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for all of the panelists for giving us so interesting explanations and reflections. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, in the headquarters of the United Nations, the International Day of Vesak is celebrated with remind us of the transcendence of Buddha and his enlightened religions, ethical and moral teachings in pursuit of human brotherhood. And why Vesak being held today? For astrological reasons, since the Buddhist calendar is of the lunar type. That is why the United Nations agrees to celebrate it on the full moon of May, full moon and Taurus, and also for spiritual reasons. Buddhism is a world religion and a philosophical and spiritual thought of Dharma family. Buddhism has more than 500 million of practitioners, 7% of the world population. Buddhist tradition seeks to overcome suffering and the cycle of death, of rebirth, whether by the attainment of the nirvana or by the path of the Buddhahood. The teaching of Buddha and his message of compassion, peace, and goodwill have reached the hearts of millions of people who follow his principles. Peace, compassion, and a vision of humanity that transcends national and international differences are fundamental in the face of the present challenges. The Buddha's teachings are more necessary today than ever, as the world faces a challenge that threatens human life, the expansion beyond the seas of COVID-19, inequally and differently countries and people. The most affected by the pandemic are the poor and the most vulnerable. Buddhism is an idea of peace, and today we are in a context of demand that condemn all type of warlike and interventionist action. For this reason, the fundamental principle of international law must be respected. We must seek for reconciliation of human beings among themselves and in the communal with nature. Today, in the face of expansion of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is necessary to place the human being above climatistic desire and give preeminence to human spirituality and sovereignty over the kingdom of capital. Today, we celebrate the World International Day of Vesak, and we applaud the initiative led by the permanent mission of the richest government of Sri Lanka in Geneva. Thank you very much for all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your statement and for your words and for your participation. I know there are many of you who want to ask questions, but I also want to respect your time, and I know Venerable Amaro has to go for something else as well. There are many questions. Some of them relate to the three characteristics of life, and there are quite a lot about impermanence or no self. I know we don't have time to get into this, but I'm really happy people are stimulated to, and there's a lot of, we're in a really interesting time where a lot of this is available. As I said, also, Amaro Bhikkhu, he has talked about all of this a lot on his website as well. On the IBF website, you can also find many teachings. I'm going to ask the panelists to sum up in a minute each. What is the reflection you would like us to take away from today? So I will go in the reverse order. Rosella, you have the floor first.
Well, for me, it's how we are all connected at a deeper level than we think. So, and I would like to say, even in this period where all our perspectives are being challenged, these opportunities are great to see how we can support each other in that concept of global solidarity and community that the Director General mentioned at the beginning. And it is a moment that we can take to connect also to our higher self and just be that self. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosella. Reverend Peniel.
Thank you. Several years ago, the WCC published a book called Religions, Fortresses, or Wellsprings. So as we conclude, one of the questions that it posed was, we often think of religions as fortresses to be defended. Can we think of them as being wellsprings for the flourishing of life? And I want us to think about it. How can we think of our respective faith traditions as wellsprings which lead to the flourishing of not just our life, but of the life of the entire earth? Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Really, really relevant, and it touched my heart, I can tell you. Dr. Sunil, your turn.
Okay, I'd like to say that actually what this situation tries to communicate to us, sometimes we were talking about letting go and letting be, and one of the things that we have very hard and fast, very rules and rigid ways that we hold on to. And one of the things that Buddhism actually teaches us is to learn from situations, learning and also being ready to transform ourselves. Now, this particular situation has actually taught us quite a lot about rethinking of the ways now, these blaming games, where did the virus come from? Where is it going to? And blah, blah, blah. When I think the irrelevance of these mundane issues, rather the importance of actually working together to help other human beings. As the Director General very nicely put it, we're all interconnected, and something that happens on one part of the world is going to affect all of us. And that unity and that need to work together, and that compassion, understanding, and being able to open-minded and actually loosen our grip of things, and also the pride that we are having in the greatest, we have got everything under control. We just suddenly realize nothing is in our control anymore. So, and I think that open-mindedness and that understanding would help us a great deal when we are, moving into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. Venerable Amaro?
Two things, really. Firstly, following on from what Dr. Sunil was saying, also what Her Excellency, the Director General, said at the beginning, if I understand what multilateralism means, that sense of the challenge of the coronavirus, and I think one of the aspects of Buddhism is that we're not about, as Buddhist practitioners, we're not about promoting Buddhism, but we're promoting human goodness. And that multilateralism, if I understand the word correctly, it's talking about our commonality. And I think one of the things that I would like to come out of this is our shared human life and our shared human values. And that if we can say out of this, and also I feel in the spirit of the United Nations, to see that beyond our nations, we are a human family. We are a family, also even more broadly, the family of living beings on the planet, but particularly the human family. And that to take away from this, in a way, putting our participation in the human family first, our nationality and our religious adherence second, and that our working together as a human group, because I think one of the things that has come forth from this pandemic is that we're all in the same boat. Whether we happen to have a Christian background or a Buddhist background or a Muslim background or a Hindu background or a secular materialist background, the virus is indifferent. It does not discriminate. And so that sense of belonging to the human family and working together as a unified group, I feel that is a very important outcome. Secondly, from one of the points that Dr. Sunil made about challenges being opportunities. And if I can just finish with a little anecdote from our community. So back in 1981, our monastery, Chittaviveka Monastery here in England, established in West Sussex, had been open for a couple of years. And Ajahn Sumedho went back to Thailand for the first time to visit our teacher, Ajahn Chah. And Ajahn Chah said, so Sumedho, how's it going there in England? He said, oh, it's amazing. I've never lived with such a helpful, committed group of monks, and the nuns community. They're really doing well. They're very sincere. They're very strict, and it's extraordinary how well everyone is working together. And Ajahn Chah was completely unimpressed. He just said, well, you won't develop very much wisdom living with that lot. It was genuine, and it was a helpful comment. Like, peace and comfort on one level is beautiful and helpful for many of us in human circumstances. But in terms of developing wisdom, it's often the challenges, the things we would never choose, that really force us to learn. And so that those challenges that are coming from the coronavirus, not just the kind of the people in the first world being locked up in our individual homes, but the knock-on effects, the kind of economic devastation through many countries. There are more than 30 million people on unemployment in the United States. The massive difference between the poor and the disadvantaged sections of society, the difficulties of famine and the resources. That these are very say challenging and difficult issues. But in the rising up to meet those challenges, things that we would never ask for, often it's those very situations that cause us to grow and to learn. And so that again, I'm not promoting further spread of the virus in any way, shape, or form, but that's the turn that we need to take to make the suffering a cause to awaken. That rather than dukkha being just dukkha as our word for suffering or difficulty, dissatisfaction, rather than dukkha just being productive of more dukkha and continuing the cycle, actually that suffering, that difficulty becomes a cause for awakening and for faith in that. Say there must be something beyond that. We must be able to work with this. There must be some way out of this. Now, what can we do? So making that turn, so turning it around in that way, so that these unwished for difficulties become a direct source for both kind of our own personal fulfillment, awakening, but also that filters out into the society, so that as a human community, we do things better. We use our resources more skillfully. we find ways to help each other more fully and completely, and so that we're forced not to just be focusing on our own little world, but we have to open up, and in that opening up we find that we can really help each other and say provide genuine benefit on a physical and material, spiritual and mental level, and that's really, I feel, the best kind of outcome of an event like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante. I can see lots of people are writing in, thanking you, thanking all the panelists. And so I need to formally thank you for your participation, your generosity, your wisdom. And really, we saw the same concepts coming out from different aspects, but people, I think, are finding it very useful. So Rosella, Reverend Peniel, Dr. Sunil, Ajahn Amaro, thank you very much. And in the Buddhist way, I will say thank you this way. We're nearing towards the end of our program. And next is really a very special person. He's my spiritual teacher. He is the president of the International Buddhist Foundation in Geneva, who really was a force behind organizing this. He's probably the most humble person I have ever met in my life. And as a UN staff for 20 years, I've met a lot of people. This is the highest recommendation I can give. He's patient with us. He teaches us. He walks with us, and he's a true, what we call a noble friend. So Venerable Halyale Vimalaratna, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Your Excellency Venerable Tatiana, the Director General of United Nations, Geneva, His Excellency Ambassadors, invited dignitaries, dear friends. I am so grateful to be here with you. This is a very historical occasion for us. In 2020, the organizing the celebration of Vesak, international, together with international community all over the world. I think you have recollected so many informations during this period with very fruitful speech and discussions. I would like to discuss about something which is behind Buddha. As a prince, he was growing with all luxuries. Okay. Until 29th year, he was enjoying his life. But he was unable to maintain his happiness or joy, satisfaction living in palace. Because when he saw the outside, when he saw the problems in the society. So the Buddhist way of life, starting here, the investigation, the observation, is very important. Because although we are living here, when we are losing mindfulness or sati, we don't know what is going on here. So in the same way, during this 26 years, 26 centuries, there are uncountable populations there, but we have a memory of few people, same as Buddha, Jesus Christ, Holy Moment, such spiritual teachers. The Prince Siddhartha was thinking according to his experience in the palace. Although they had so many things for the satisfaction of the life, he was unable to satisfy with, because he saw so many people are in starvation, without lack of food, or without lack of basic needs. So he was unable to compare what is the reason for this? In the same time, those who have wealth, those who have power, they have no concern about the others. So he was thinking, to be the next king, he has no power to find solution for the problems. That is why the emancipation, he decided to leave the palace and went to meet different teachers. He studied during 6 years period, studying different philosophies and practicing different techniques. Finally, he realized the problems are not external. This is the leading point in Buddhism. Always, the normal experience of the life is always we believe that the problems are outside, external. So Buddhist way of life is self-investigation. So that is the starting point to be a Buddhist, right view, Sammaditthi. So the Prince Siddhartha became hermit, and during many years period, after having a deep study, it is called Arya Pariyesana, normal research. It is not a normal research, noble research. During this period, he tested with his experience of the life that finally he wanted to see the reality by the way of observing himself inside. So outside and inside. So normal way of life is always keep contact with external objects using the senses. Chakku, Soda, Gana, Jihva, Kaya. And objects, Rupa, Shabda, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha. By using our senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. Always we need visual objects and the objects for the happiness. Because always we understand the world is there. The reality, according to the philosophy of Buddha, Buddha says the world is here, inside. You have to realize your own nature. If you are unable to realize your own nature, always you are misled. Always your plan and implementation are harmful for you as well as harmful for others. So what is experiencing in even today also, it is the world nature. So the most important factor, we can understand the use of the Buddha and becoming a Buddha or the philosophy as a result of a main theme is a natural factor. It is impermanency, anicca. If the world is permanent, no need to discuss or no need to have any other philosophy, so something. The world is always subject to change, the anicca. This is the natural system. So the normal way of the human mind don't want or don't have time, don't have opportunity to realize this anicca. This is the contradiction. The system of the world is in another way, the way of thinking is another way. So two different factors. So Buddha says, so long as one is unable to realize this nature, always suffering is there. Because believe that always try to find so many things from outside for the happiness. So the things are not according to the wish of the person. Things are going on according to the way of this natural process. So Buddha says, with the self-investigation, he realized the problem is inside. There's a craving mind. There is nothing else. This craving mind is the main force. So greediness is called tushna or tanha. When there is such a power inside, it is together with aversion, no conflict. So this is the psychological approachment in Buddhism, how to see your inner values, always destroying by this craving mind and aversion or anger or conflict mind. So this is very important. That is why Buddha says, be calm, observe inside, because the mind is always in extremes, the attachment or detachment, with happiness or unhappiness. There is no balance in mind. So how to develop in a balance? This is the practical teaching. Understanding with the right view is always supporting you to develop your inner balance. Right view is understanding things according to the reality. So the concept of I, my, mind. Although we believe that, although we use these words, there is no one called I. There is nothing belongs to me. The things are according to natural factors. So Buddha's teaching always guiding to see this reality by the way of training this mind. Without inner calmness, without developed concentration, it is difficult to realize this. So you need to have inner calmness. With this calmness, you can see what is going on. So Buddha advised, avoid from extremes. In first teaching of the Buddha, it's called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Dveme bhikkhave anta pabbajitena nisevitabba. Those who find liberation, those who find inner peace, need to avoid two extremes. One is attachment, the other side is detachment, or contact or conflict, or greediness or anger. So because of these two extremes, increasing inside delusion is called avijja, ignorant. So totally losing the energies, positive energies of human life. So practical way of guiding to how to reorganize the way of thinking and to develop understanding until the wisdom. So this sila, discipline, one need to have discipline. Discipline inside and discipline in body, senses. The inner calmness always supporting to use this material body in peace, avoiding so many difficulties, as well as using this energy for the harmness of others. So one can use this energy, one can use this ability with human life for the benefit of the world as a result of this cultivating insight with positive thoughts. So right view, so the driving forces inside, anger and greediness, delusion. So we need to establish mindfulness. Establishing mind, try to eliminate step by step the inner pollutions. It's called meditation. Different techniques are there. How to find inner purification as a result of this training. So I think all of you discuss here, you know very well, it's an eightfold path. It is based on sila, the discipline. So discipline inside. And samadhi, concentration, physically as well as mentally. When the person is developed with such discipline, it's easy to manage inner calmness. It is supporting. One can find very good balance in material body as well as mind. When the mind and the body is in balance, as a result of this understanding and training, always supporting to realize things, to see things clearly. So Buddha's teaching always supporting to people to see the reality within this life. So self-investigation is a very important thing to understand. So I think very important factors here. Everything is described under the cause and effect. So according to Paticcasamuppada, result, reason, and results. The things are always related with this cause and effect. It's a very important. According to this teaching, one can experience, we can experience what is the philosophy, the practical for my peace, for my liberation, for my inner purification. So one can perfectly find inner peace as a result of this long-term training, because the mind, the wanting mind is always behaving with sensual pleasure. So it's opposite when one can train this mind with understanding. Peace is not outside, peace is inside. Happiness is not outside, happiness is inside. How can we find? So if we can eliminate all inner pollutions, same as greediness, hateful thoughts, and anger, so many things are there. With mindfulness, step by step, removing all such negative powers, slowly increasing, awaken someone. Awaken, Buddha is called awakened one, enlightened beings. So as a result of this training, within this lifetime, one can find liberation, liberating from this polluted mind. It is the guidelines, philosophy to find perfect inner peace in the world. I think there are so many values for the education in the world, because the system is not going on according to the spiritual development of the people in the society. It is another subject. But we should be intelligent, we should be understand what is our responsibility to use such noble teachings for the benefit of the person as well as for the benefit of the world. So then when we can use all such spiritual teachings and philosophies, we can find a peaceful world, avoiding conflicts, because people believe that the protection is with arms, the security is there, the health is with so many medicines, the protection is there. But the Buddha says there are very special teachings, Buddha, during this lifetime, without permission of your religion, without permission of your race, without permission of any kind of things, you are getting old and you have been sick. And finally, we have to die. For this natural process, there is no any situations to avoid. So Buddha says you have to realize your own nature, then you can be in peace until even in the last breath also. You can see peace, you can say goodbye with peaceful mind to see this world as a person who realized the life and the world. So actually, I am so happy, as well as I am so grateful to pay my tribute for all of you for being here to celebrate the noble life of Buddha. Buddha is awakened one. When we can respect others, so naturally you are respected. You will be respected. The one of the most respectable role in the world, in universe, Lord Buddha. Altogether, we are respecting, appreciating, and discussing about his values and try to attribute and try to put into practice in the world peace, for peace and happiness in the world. So using this noble teachings, all together shall we pay our respect for the Buddha and all the spiritual beings in the world, as well as let we cultivate such noble teachings for inner peace, as well as peace in the world. the International Buddhist Foundation always working with this purpose for the world peace. It's based in Geneva. Since its inception in 1992, contributes to guide the community. IBF has been able to participate in UN program since 1998 as an NGO in the promotion of its aims and objects to contribute to the establishment of universal and lasting peace, promote the Buddhist way of life compatible with the universal norms of the normal and social ethics, to foster friendship and consolidate harmony with the Swiss and international communities. So, with the noble blessings of Buddha and most noble teaching and noble disciples, may all beings be in peace and happiness, to find peace and happiness in the world, as well as conveying blessings for all those who are suffering with this pandemic situations, and all beings are suffering in different ways. Shall we radiate our compassion towards all beings to be in peace and happiness? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you for those words and for the kindness, compassion words that we radiated together to the world. Before I invite the acting permanent representative of the Sri Lanka mission to the UN for the vote of thanks, I'd like to recognize that there were many ordained monks, Buddhist monks, in the group today. I noticed only some. Forgive me if I have missed some. Venerable Olande Ananda, Venerable Rambukwelle Devananda, Venerable Karual Gaswat, Venerable Anuruddha from Zurich Temple, Venerable Diga Dasi Bhikkhu, Venerable Sumana Jyoti from the International Buddhist Foundation, Bante Mangala, Bhikkhu Kanchana, and I think Venerable Sumangala. I apologize to the Venerable priests that I did not acknowledge. I wanted to say that this is not just a special day for Buddhists, but the Buddhist clergy. This is the day where we most often interact with you, if you like, recalibrate our spiritual life on this day. Many people will observe a SIL program, so I wanted, as the lay community, to thank you. And I would like now to invite Ms. Diane Mendes from the Sri Lanka mission, the acting permanent representative, to give the vote of thanks. Diane, the floor is yours.
Religious dignitaries, Her Excellency Tatiana Valovaya, Director General of the United Nations Office in Geneva, distinguished ambassadors, permanent representatives, and members of the diplomatic missions in Geneva, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the permanent mission of Sri Lanka to the UN and other international organizations in Geneva, the permanent mission of Thailand to the UN and other international organizations in Geneva, and the International Buddhist Foundation in Geneva, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks at this virtual event to commemorate the Vesak Day 2020 and the 20th anniversary of the unanimous adoption of the UN General Assembly resolution initiated by Sri Lanka by members of the UN, recognizing internationally the Day of Vesak. As we heard today, the teachings of Buddhism are universal in nature. Buddhism advocates moderation, non-violence, peaceful coexistence, and tolerance. It teaches humans to safeguard and preserve resources and the natural environment as a means to respect the lives of all sentient beings. Values such as kindness and non-violence that are central to the Buddhist way of life are consistent with those of other major religions in the world and the fundamental principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Therefore, I am confident that the insightful discussion that we had today on the teachings of Lord Buddha and their continuing relevance to the present day helped enrich our spirituality, well-being, and intellect, especially as we grapple with the complex and difficult challenges associated with facing a global pandemic. I wish to place on record our gratitude to our keynote speaker, Venerable Ajahn Amaro, abbot of the Amaravati Monastery in the UK, for the address on the opportunity to practice the Buddhist principle of loving kindness in the COVID-19 pandemic and giving us much food for thought. To Venerable Halyale Vimalaratna, President of the International Buddhist Foundation in Geneva, for his valuable analysis on the relevance of Buddhist teachings in the modern world. And to express our deep appreciation to Her Excellency Tatiana Valovaya, Director General of the UN Office in Geneva, for her opening remarks at this event, emphasizing the need to preserve and strengthen international cooperation and to renew our commitment to building a world based on solidarity to ensure peace and dignity for all, especially in the current difficult environment resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. I also wish to express our sincere thanks to Mr. Ravinatha Arya Singha, Secretary Ministry of Foreign Relations of Sri Lanka, for joining us from Sri Lanka to discuss the significance of Vesak Day, and to His Excellency Mr. Seth Vanamati, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Thailand to the United Nations in Geneva, for his timely presentation on Buddhism in the era of new normal after COVID-19. It is well known that Buddhism advocates and preaches non-violence and peace as its universal message and does not approve any kind of violence or destruction of life. We listened to a thought-provoking discussion on the contribution of Buddhism to peace, and I wish to thank the distinguished panelists, Venerable Halyale Vimalaratna, President of the International Buddhist Foundation of Geneva, Mr. Sunil Karyakaravana, Buddhist Chaplain to Her Majesty's Armed Forces, UK, and Ms. Rosella Ping, Master Coach, International Coach Team Federation, as well as Dr. Gaya Gamhevage, Event Moderator and co-founder of the Wisdom House, which is co-sponsoring this event. I also wish to express appreciation to the distinguished ambassadors and permanent representatives of many countries mentioned at the start of this program, the DPRs and the colleagues from the missions who are virtually present at this event today. We appreciate your presence here today. Finally, I wish to acknowledge the efforts of the International Buddhist Foundation of Geneva, in particular, Secretary Mr. Lalanta Sirisenage and Dr. Samantha Karunajiva, as well as the staff of the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka, for working hard to put this program together and get the RSVPs and all the events, all the arrangements that were required. Particularly Manori, Rajni, Sabina, and Rajni. We really appreciate your help. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you.
Thank you, Dayani. We are a few minutes late. I sincerely apologize, but I'm really grateful to nearly 150 of you who stayed until the last moment. I don't want to take too much more time, but I'd like to leave you with one verse that most Buddhists recite. And this verse is about the teachings of the Buddha. And in Pali, we say, Swakato Bhagavato Dhammo, Sanditiko Akaliko, Ehipasiko, Opanaiko, Pachattam Vedita Bovinyohiti. It's a very simple word. Verse. It means well expounded, well explained, well proclaimed is the Buddha's teaching. Sanditiko, it relates to seeing in this moment. Akaliko, the results are attainable here and now. The one I really like, Ehipasiko, come and see for yourself. Don't take my word for it, come and see for yourself. Opanaiko, leading inwards to the goal of liberation. And the last one is very important, Pachattam Vedita Bovinyohiti, to be realized by the wise for themselves. It is something to be experienced, it's not something to be learned. And with that, I leave you with thanks and gratitude. As everybody has said, may the blessings of the Triple Gem really act out in your life so that you can find the peace, the compassion, the kindness, not just to others, but to yourself. Peace outside starts with peace inside. I wish you a happy Vesak, a happy rest of the day, and may you have food for thought. Thank you, everybody. The recording of this will be available on the IBF website. The website address is here. We will make it available to Ajahn Amaro to put it on his website. And we hope we see you again in a future event. As was said, I'm co-founder of the Wisdom House, where we bring science and modern thinking to ancient spirituality. I'm sure our paths will cross again. And if not, until next year. Have a great day.